The boy's name didn't matter at first. He was just a child walking home after school, swinging a backpack that held more doodles than homework, tracing his steps along the familiar cracked sidewalk. The afternoon was peaceful in the way only ordinary days can be. Cars hummed by. A dog barked at nothing. A breeze nudged leaves into a lazy tumble. He paused to tie a loose shoelace, small fingers fumbling, brow furrowed, and that was when everything changed. There was no warning. No roar of engines. No streak across the sky. The air simply bent around him, forming a ripple that shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. He didn't have time to gasp before he was lifted upward, legs dangling, backpack slipping off one shoulder. The ripple folded into itself, swallowed him whole, and vanished. The street returned to stillness as if nothing had happened. But cameras had seen it. A doorbell camera on one house. A dashcam across the street. A security feed perched above a convenience store. Each caught a different angle, the distortion, the sudden disappearance. Within minutes the footage hit local servers. Within 10, it was flagged by automated anomaly systems. Within 30, it reached the desks of analysts who had never once in their careers seen something they couldn't explain. Panic didn't come first. Calculation did. Analysts cross-referenced energy signatures, ran particle decomposition models, checked against classified atmospheric events. None matched. Someone voiced the unthinkable word, extraterrestrial, and no one laughed. When the footage went public, panic followed. Parents dragged their children indoors. The child's own mother collapsed when police told her what little they understood. A search began, combing every inch of the street, as if the boy might still be hiding nearby. But the experts had already concluded he was no longer on Earth. In orbit, a different kind of scrambling took place. The US, China, Russia, India, rivals on most days, shared raw intelligence in real time. Observatories rewound satellite data to hunt for anomalies. They found one, a microscopic fluctuation in orbit, exactly synchronized with the instant the child vanished. A cloaked object, slipping away faster than anything built by human hands. The realization settled like a weight on the world. Earth had been visited. And one of its children had been taken. On the other side of the galaxy, the child sat on a cold metal table, shivering under harsh white lights. The beings around him weren't monstrous, they were clinical. Their tall frames moved with dispassionate precision. Their skin seemed grown rather than born, a pale synthetic sheen. They communicated in soft clicks and murmurs that carried no warmth. To them, the boy wasn't a hostage. He wasn't even a person. He was data. A biological sample from a primitive world they were mapping and cataloging. Their civilization spanned hundreds of systems. They didn't conquer by force, they simply collected. Culture, species, resources, all logged, categorized, and studied. Humans were a footnote in a database that ran deeper than the oceans of Earth. The child tried to ask where he was. His voice trembled. The aliens didn't acknowledge it. They observed the way his pupils contracted, the way his pulse hammered under fear. They found it interesting. Back on Earth, fear transformed into something sharper. World leaders attempted first contact. Every major array and transmitter blasted signals into the void. No reply came. Not even static. It was as if humanity were a noise too insignificant to notice. But humans weren't built to accept silence. They weren't built to surrender a child to an unseen empire. Scientists pooled resources with unprecedented speed. Military branches exchanged classified research. Engineers worked sleeplessly on energy detection algorithms capable of identifying the cloaking signature hidden in the abduction footage. No one argued about jurisdiction. No one demanded credit. Every mind raced toward the same goal. Find them. Reach them. Get him back. For centuries, humanity had feared the idea of being small in the galaxy. But something primal ignited when one small human was taken. The fear didn't shrink them, it sharpened them. The day ended with the world changed. Nothing exploded. No battles raged. Yet humanity crossed the threshold without realizing it. They wouldn't wait to be studied. They wouldn't kneel to a silent captor. They wouldn't let a single child vanish into the stars. Not without making the galaxy answer for it. The world didn't mourn quietly. Within hours of confirming the abduction, every major nation initiated emergency protocols usually reserved for extinction-level threats. Intelligence agencies abandoned secrecy barriers they had guarded for decades. Databases fused. Classified research poured into shared channels. Human rivalry didn't disappear, it simply became irrelevant beside the singular mandate taking shape across the globe. Retrieve the child. No matter the cost. The first step was information. Scientists mapped the residual energy left behind by the cloaked vessel, a trace so faint that early algorithms dismissed it as sensor noise. But now every supercomputer on Earth tore through the data, running simulations that bent known physics into uncomfortable shapes. The signal wasn't propulsion residue. It was a spatial shear created by a discontinuity in localized spacetime. A form of faster-than-light transition that defied current models. Yet humans didn't freeze at impossibility, they treated the impossible as a blueprint. Laboratories repurposed particle accelerators to test the shear signature. Engineers discovered that the alien distortion wasn't perfect. It left behind a microscopic ripple that decayed along a predictable curve. If they could replicate that curve, perhaps they could follow it. Or tear themselves through the same fold. Politicians didn't argue budgets, they emptied them. Space agencies merged operations into a single initiative, fronted by a multinational command council. It wasn't symbolic. It was functional. Humanity recognized that no single flag could answer this threat alone. The project received an operational name that spread across networks in minutes. Homebound. It was less a title and more a vow. Military strategists worked alongside astrophysicists. Cybersecurity experts shared tables with orbital engineers. Generals who barely tolerated one another now stood shoulder to shoulder, contributing every resource their nations had accumulated. Even private corporations surrendered proprietary technology, quantum processors, experimental propulsion tests, classified AI prototypes. Humanity didn't need ownership. Humanity needed capability. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a joint study between 3 universities, using the alien energy signature to refine gravimetric distortion equations. Within a week, they produced a theoretical FTL jump model. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't stable. But it pointed in one direction, the path the abducting ship had taken as it exited Earth's orbit. The second breakthrough arrived when an AI-designed algorithm recognized subtle harmonics hidden in the spatial ripple. These harmonics formed a trail, faint but decipherable. Humans suddenly had a destination. Not coordinates, exactly, but a route burned into spacetime by alien travel. While research advanced, Earth prepared for conflict. Defense networks went from regional to global. Satellites were reconfigured to operate as a synchronized mesh capable of acting as a planetary early warning system. Swarms of drones patrolled critical airspace. Spaceports transformed into military hubs. For the first time, humanity wasn't looking down at its own borders. It was looking outward. The child's abduction had done something that centuries of diplomacy had failed to accomplish: unite 8 billion hearts toward a single purpose. Fear hardened into resolve. Resolve sharpened into determination. Determination grew into something stranger: confidence. A quiet, burning belief that they could defy the limits of their era because they had no other choice. In strategy chambers, commanders reviewed simulations of possible hostile engagements. Every simulation ended the same way: humanity outmatched. The alien empire's capabilities dwarfed anything Earth possessed. But this did not discourage the planners. Instead, it pushed them to adopt tactics alien militaries rarely considered: unpredictable maneuvers, sacrificial strikes, unconventional weapons that prioritized creativity over technological polish. Humans had fought each other in chaotic wars for millennia. Now, that instinct became an asset. The final piece of the initiative came from a coalition of engineers who fused recycled rocket technology with experimental graviton stabilizers. The prototypes were untested. Some melted during ignition, others detonated before leaving the ground. But each failure made the next attempt stronger. Progress wasn't linear, it was explosive, iterative, relentless. On the 11th day after the abduction, the Council authorized the first manned vessel to attempt the newly developed FTL transition. The ship was crude compared to the elegance of the alien craft, but it represented something far more dangerous than technological parity. It represented human will. Billions watched as the launch count reached 0. The world held its breath as the engines ignited, tearing a hole through spacetime. For a moment, the ship blurred like a smear of paint dragged across a canvas, and then it vanished. Not lost. Not destroyed. Gone forward. Humanity had taken its first step into the wider galaxy, driven not by conquest, not by curiosity, but by the refusal to abandon one child. The message was clear. If the galaxy wanted to test humanity, it had chosen the wrong trigger. The jump vessel didn't glide into alien space, it tore into it, alarms blaring, hull groaning as reality stitched itself back together around the crude human craft. The crew barely had a moment to steady themselves before sensors lit up with signatures no human system had ever recorded. They had emerged at the fringes of the Galactic Empire's border, a region the abductors considered so insignificant they didn't even cloak their outposts. To them, humanity could never reach this far. Their arrogance was the weak point. The human ship's presence triggered an automated alert across the Empire's perimeter. Patrol vessels began converging, sleek, silver constructs designed for intimidation rather than war. Their movements were smooth, almost casual. They approached as if intercepting a stray meteor. A single human transmission broadcast a warning to stand down. The aliens didn't bother responding. They opened fire. The first volley shredded space around the human vessel but failed to land a direct hit. The crew had anticipated this. Humanity's greatest advantage was unpredictability. Their ship jolted into maneuver patterns designed by AI systems trained on centuries of asymmetrical warfare. The aliens' targeting algorithms faltered, and used to opponents who burned fuel recklessly and pivoted at angles that violated optimal movement logic. The humans fired back with rail-based projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. The Empire had no shields designed to counter raw physical force delivered with such violent inefficiency. The first alien patrol ship folded in half before its crew realized that, primitive, humans had breached their defenses. The explosion echoed across the border, and the Empire finally understood the intruders were not debris. More ships jumped in, this time armed and cautious. Their unified formation contrasted sharply with humanity's chaotic assault style. Yet order crumbled before creativity. Humans chained EMP pulses with kinetic strikes, disrupting power cores and rendering sleek vessels inert. Marines prepared boarding drills, but most enemy ships never remained intact long enough to capture. As battles escalated, the Empire's Command Council received the first reports describing the attackers as bipedal organics from an underdeveloped world. Initial reactions ranged from disbelief to indignation. But as casualty numbers rose, indignation turned into unease. Humans fought with a desperation the Empire had never encountered. They didn't withdraw when outnumbered, didn't wait for reinforcements, didn't follow predictable tactical trees. They shifted strategies mid-engagement, as if chaos itself was their doctrine. A captured Empire officer, stunned and bleeding, described humanity in a debrief. They adapt too quickly. They move as though they expect to die and intend to make their deaths costly. The interrogators relayed a single piece of critical intelligence. The child was alive, held deeper within the Empire's interior regions, considered a low-priority cognitive subject. That terminology ignited fury across the human ranks. A low-priority subject had triggered the most intense mobilization in human history. The contrast exposed the Empire's fatal misunderstanding of what humanity valued. The fleet pressed forward. Each victory revealed more about alien military structures. Humans learned how their formations operated, how their communication relays functioned, how their shielding systems recharged. Every encounter fed into simulation engines aboard the lead flagship, refining strategy at a pace the Empire could encounter. As news spread across alien sectors, fear replaced arrogance. Broadcasts described Earth as a proto-civilization exhibiting disproportionate aggression. Others used harsher terms: feral, incalculable, catastrophic. The Empire's historians searched for previous rebellions sparked by specimen collection, but none had escalated with such ferocity, or started because of a single abducted child. Humanity, for the first time, became a recognized threat. The border defense line collapsed after a coordinated human strike chain reacted to the Empire's power grid, disabling dozens of stations in minutes. The path inward opened, not through superior technology, but through relentless pressure applied at every weakness. As the fleet advanced, transmissions from the Empire changed. No longer dismissive, they now carried urgency and alarm. Some attempted negotiation, offering assurances of reasonable compensation. Humanity ignored every message that didn't confirm the child's location. The Empire realized then what its analysts had failed to predict: humans were not waging a war of conquest or retaliation. They were waging a recovery mission, fueled by a loyalty so absolute it rewrote the rules of interstellar conflict. The third phase of the operation concluded with one undeniable truth spreading across the galaxy: humans were not technologically advanced, but they were something far more dangerous. They were impossible to deter, impossible to intimidate, and impossible to stop until the child was returned. The human fleet entered the Empire's interior territories like a storm pushing through a brittle door. Every defense line that should have slowed them fell too quickly, not because humans overpowered them with superior technology, but because they refused to yield. Each battle brought new data, new insights, and new tactics. The Empire was no longer confused. They were afraid. Their command council issued evacuation orders for research facilities, but one location remained heavily guarded: a cognitive analysis station built into the metallic shell of a drifting artificial moon. Intelligence confirmed the child was inside. Human ships decelerated near the structure, bracing for the inevitable trap. Dozens of alien vessels formed a blockade around the installation, but their ranks were thinner than expected. Many had already been pulled to other fronts to stop humanity's advance. That gap in their formation became the route through which human boarding teams launched their assault transports. Inside the station, sterile corridors hummed with cold efficiency. The staff continued their routines even as alarms echoed through the halls. To them, the invading humans were an anomaly, not a threat. They believed their security grids and containment fields would hold. They didn't understand that humans were moving through those corridors with the singular focus of a species unwilling to leave one child in foreign hands. The child sat alone in a glass-walled chamber, hugging his knees to his chest. Days had passed since the abduction, though time felt strange under artificial lighting that never dimmed. The scientists monitored his reactions: heart rate fluctuations, stress indicators, cognitive responses. They documented everything but offered no comfort. They didn't see fear, they saw data points. The first explosion shook the lab as humans breached the outer ring. Researchers stiffened, finally realizing the intruders had reached the impossible distance. One of them muttered disbelief, another initiated lockdown procedures. Metal shutters began sealing, but human breaching charges ripped through them before they could lock. The sounds approached: rapid footsteps, sharp metallic impacts, clipped human commands. When the operatives reached the containment chamber, the child lifted his head. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition: human voices, human footsteps, human urgency. The team entered, weapons drawn, scanning every corner even though the room held nothing but a trembling boy and silent instruments. A soldier knelt, armor scuffed from the assault. His voice was steady, gentler than the situation deserved. He confirmed the child's identity, then extended a gloved hand. The boy hesitated only a moment before clutching it. His first words came out in a whisper. "You came." The soldier answered without pause, as if the entire war had hinged on that single truth. "All of us did." The phrase spread through the team, grounding them. It wasn't a slogan. It was a fact. Every ship, every scientist, Every country, every action taken since that afternoon on Earth had been for him. Researchers who had dismissed humanity now faced the operative's fury. One alien stammered, asking why such a disproportionate reaction had occurred over a single young specimen. A soldier turned his gaze on him, voice stripped of diplomacy. "Because he isn't a specimen. He's ours." The alien recoiled, baffled by a loyalty so absolute it made their centuries-old logic seem hollow. As the team prepared to extract the child, the station's internal announcement system activated. A cold automated message declared that a reinforcement fleet was inbound. The operatives knew the signal meant time was running out. They relayed extraction coordinates to the fleet, but the incoming armada was already visible on long-range sensors, a wave of ships far larger than anything encountered so far. The human flagship ordered a defensive formation, refusing retreat. Crews secured the child aboard the extraction transport and initiated a return sequence to the fleet's protective line. No one spoke of withdrawal. The mission wasn't complete until the entire fleet escaped with him. A final tremor rattled the station as alien forces began their approach. The child clung to his rescuer's arm, sensing the tension. The soldier squeezed his shoulder in reassurance, not with words but with presence. Humanity hadn't crossed the galaxy for a symbolic gesture, they had come to bring him home. As the extraction vessel accelerated toward the human formation, the Empire launched a full-scale counterattack. This wasn't the end, it was the threshold of the bloodiest confrontation yet. The fleet prepared to shield the child at any cost. The message was already written in the Empire's reports. Humans would not abandon him. Not in the lab. Not in the station. Not in the coming war. The human fleet braced for the assault the moment the extraction vessel cleared the station's outer perimeter. Enemy signatures multiplied across the scanners, an overwhelming tide of ships, each larger and more advanced than anything humanity had faced so far. The Empire had finally abandoned its dismissive stance. This time they came to crush, not to observe. Human command didn't waste a second. Every ship shifted into a defensive barrier around the extraction craft carrying the child. No formation manual had prepared them for this. They built their wall instinctively, every vessel anchoring itself as if placing its hull between the child and the Empire was a biological imperative. The Empire launched first. Thousands of beams streaked toward the human formation. Instead of scattering or retreating, the fleet surged forward as one, taking the brunt of the opening barrage. Hulls buckled. Armor tore. But the line held long enough for Earth's vessels to return fire with kinetic volleys and destabilizer charges. These strikes weren't elegant, they were brutal, tearing through alien shields by stacking raw force. The Empire's captains recoiled at the ferocity of the counterattack. The battle erupted into a chaotic storm. Human ships fought with reckless precision, pivoting through enemy lines, colliding shields, and unleashing payloads designed under desperation rather than convention. The Empire responded with disciplined formations, but discipline fractured under humanity's relentless unpredictability. Every lost human ship signaled another surge of aggression from the remaining fleet. They fought with the tenacity of a species that had already decided the outcome long before the first shot was fired: the child would live. They would all die before allowing anything else. The extraction vessel raced toward the flagship, weaving through the debris of shattered vessels. Inside, the child watched flashes of light streak across space, unaware of the mathematics of war but fully aware that an entire world was fighting for him. The soldier beside him anchored him with a steady voice, assuring him they were almost safe. But safety was relative. The Empire's central dreadnought advanced, its main cannon charging, a weapon capable of annihilating the entire fleet in a single discharge. Human command registered the threat instantly. Their sensors calculated the countdown until detonation. There wasn't time to outrun it. So humanity chose a different path. The flagship initiated a final maneuver, something engineers had designed as a theoretical impossibility. A swarm of autonomous FTL ramming drones launched from its hull, streaking toward the dreadnought. These machines weren't meant for survival. They were created for one purpose: weaponize the unpredictability of FTL transitions. The drones flickered, vanishing and reappearing in erratic bursts, each jump destabilizing space around them. The dreadnought attempted to recalibrate its shields, but the drones struck too quickly. One blinked into existence inside the ship's outer plating. Another embedded itself into a reactor channel. The cumulative effect didn't simply damage the dreadnought, it tore it apart from the inside, ripping a hole through its core as space-time buckled. The explosion that followed unraveled the enemy's formation and erased their primary advantage. The Empire's fleet faltered. A wave of silence rippled through their channels as commanders grasped what had happened. Humanity had weaponized desperation into a strategy no Empire would dare use. And it had worked. The remaining alien ships began withdrawing, not in formation but in disarray. The realization spread across their ranks: this conflict wasn't worth the cost. These humans would fight until their last breath, and victory against a species like that promised nothing but ruin. Humanity did not pursue. They didn't need to. The message had already been carved into the Empire's memory. As the extraction craft docked with the flagship, medics rushed in. The child was lifted into waiting arms, frightened but unharmed. The soldier who had rescued him finally removed his helmet, not for ceremony, but to offer the boy a face he could trust. For the first time since the abduction, the child relaxed, leaning into safety he could finally feel. A ship-wide broadcast followed, then a fleet-wide one. A single transmission, delivered to every Empire frequency. "Do not touch our children! Do not touch our world! There will not be a second warning!" The Empire didn't respond. They didn't challenge the claim. They recorded it, archived it, and built policies around it. Humanity turned for home, carrying with them the child whose disappearance had changed the galaxy's balance of power. The cost had been immense, but the principle forged in that fire became legend across the stars. Humans were gentle with their own, but merciless toward anyone who threatened them. And the galaxy, now fully aware, would never forget it.